all come today to our session. Let's get started because we have a lot to cover. We are so excited to have you at the George Washington 2020 Creativity and Entrepreneurship Conference, and we hope that you've enjoyed some of the other sessions that we've had today. We have a lot of exciting material to cover in this session as we dive into all of our new worlds of virtual learning and working. My name is Sana Masroor, and I'll be one of the moderators of this session. But before we move straight into our discussions, I wanted to take a moment to thank our wonderful session organizers who have been working hard to put this conference together. As we go through our session, my colleagues will be monitoring the chat to help flag any questions you may have. So feel free to use the chat function. Today, we'll be spending some time to discuss the education industry and how it's been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, with a panel discussion with Mr. Brendan Desetti, Director of Strategic and Public Affairs at D2L, and Ms. Allison Freed, the founder of Burke Schoolhouse and Director of Strategic Communications at the Stand Together Foundation. After our brief discussion, we will move into a presentation on our new world of teleworking by Mr. Joey Price, founder of Jumpstart HR LLC. So let's get straight into our conversation with Ali and Brendan. Brendan, why don't you start us off today by taking a moment to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what you do. Ali, why don't you go first?
Sure, great. Well, thank you so much for having me here today. Thrilled to be here. Brendan, glad to be here with you. So yeah, I'll just take a moment. So during my day job, like Sanam said, I lead communications for a national nonprofit based in Arlington called Stand Together Foundation. We partner with nonprofits around the country to help really maximize and scale efforts of different nonprofit groups that are working to break the cycle of poverty around the country. One of the big areas of focus for my job is working with, we call them social entrepreneurs. So people who are taking it upon themselves to kind of break free of the status quo and drive change in their communities. And so when this pandemic hit, I really had to tap deep into that mental model to think about what was going to work best for me and my family when it came to education. I'm a working mom. My husband was also working at home, and we have 3 kids under the age of 5. So to say that things were a little crazy is an understatement. It was so loud, it was so chaotic. And knowing that school was going to start back up in the fall, potentially virtually, was just kind of a hard pill to swallow. And so we had to really dig deep to think through what was the best approach for our family. And so we ended up opting to build a micro school out in our basement, and for our rising kindergartner. The other ones are a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. So really excited to talk to you guys today about kind of what went into that decision making, all the different thought avenues and channels we went down. So that's just a quick update on me. We've got a micro school in the basement. They're letting out right now. 3 o'clock is when their bell rings, and it's been great. It's been a wild ride.
Yeah, it sounds like it has been a wild ride. I've heard a lot of different stories, or read a lot of different stories about parents and groups starting their own little pods of school. So hi, everyone. My name is Brendan Desetti. I'm the Director of Strategy and Public Affairs for D2L here in the US. D2L is a learning technology company, and we develop a learning management system called Brightspace, which is used by K-12 school districts, higher education institutions, and corporate learning programs for the delivery of online and blended learning. So my role with D2L, we used to go by Desire to Learn. So if you know us by a different name, you might. My role at D2L is to monitor the legislative and regulatory landscape for changes within our markets and education in particular, which is such a regulated environment. So, I monitor those so that we can respond to new requirements or opportunities that might pop up based on the changing landscape of the law and requirements on schools. In addition to that work, I'm involved in our thought leadership portfolio around, which centers largely around the future of work and learning. So my role there is producing some policy briefs and white papers that inform that space. And then I also work with several groups within the company on our business strategy within our education segments. So very excited to be talking to you about what we're seeing in COVID and where education is going.
Wow, thank you both so much for joining us today. Brendan, as you're seeing in your work right now, how do you think the pandemic has impacted the wider education industry?
So, I don't think that COVID and the pandemic has really changed the trajectory of where learning is going, both in K-12 and higher education. But what it has had an exponential impact on is the rate of change. So I would probably say that COVID and this pandemic has propelled the education market forward by at least 5 years, really, in my opinion, in terms of the technology that's being used and the different learning strategies that are being taken into account. So, just as an example, in K-12, last January, February, we're still in 2020, January, February 2020, we were still having to define a learning management system for a lot of districts and explain the need for a platform like ours that enables the multi-instructional options. So, basically explaining, why do you need to build resiliency into your school system? And largely an LMS was seen as this a very cool tool to have, a lot of interesting and a lot of potential. And it would be really nice to have if we had the resources. And then fast forward to April, February to April, and the LMS was not only widely known as an instructional tool, but it was widely agreed upon that it was a requirement to the operation of a functional school system. That no longer was this like a cool thing to have. It was like, well, that's a basic level of technological digital learning infrastructure to have in place. So really there's no longer hemming and hawing about trying it as well, trying online learning. So in essence, we've gotten past that whole should we conversation and more to like, how do we do it better? How do we really improve and iterate on new models of learning? And then I'll just touch on higher education. The LMS has really been an institutional requirement for 2 decades or so. I'm sure everyone on this call interacted with an LMS or a competitor of ours in some way, shape, or form over that time. So a lot of the usage was still for on-campus students going into the pandemic. Yes, they had online options, but the majority of students in the US go to school in person. So the immediate shift to online learning across the board brought more eyes to the online side of institutions. So I see that as a big change within the pandemic. A lot of people looking at that more closely. And then looking at the quality of learning that's taking place in that online side, and then getting people to really now starting to question what's the value of a college degree? Am I paying for the experience or am I paying for the actual knowledge that I'm gaining? So we're seeing a lot of institutions rushing to implement or scale some innovative learning models to help engage students via distance. And then many are creating or refreshing all the content that they've had online, seeing that they're like, oh, we have to have brand new content, or we have to have things that are far more engaging for this whole new sort of non-choice online students who are being pushed into online. And then the online institution, really, I think this is the fundamental change, is become more ingrained in the main campus than it probably was before. So I think those are big changes, and probably across the whole board. And we could get into this, a little bit more. And I'm sure, Ali, you have more thoughts on this. Is that the biggest change is going to be, I think, a permanent across K-12 and higher ed, a permanent shift in expectations, preferences, and attitudes towards learning in school. Like, I'm really interested in the idea of parents like Ali who have started to school, who maybe think, I don't know if this is you, Ali, but like, I kind of like this flexibility. I kind of like this option. Maybe I do want to do blended learning, hybrid learning, or fully online learning connected to my school when this pandemic's over. So really, what is that change in desire and expectation and preference going to be after all of this?
Yeah, thank you so much, Ali. What are your thoughts on this topic, and also just personally, how do you think you've adapted to education during the pandemic?
Yeah, Brendan, that's a perfect segue, because for me, it has forced me to go down a thought process that I never would have been in before. You know what I mean? I feel like we moved into our house 3 years ago, knowing that we had young kids because of the school district, right? We wanted to be here because of the school district. And I feel like it's very easy to just kind of get caught up in the status quo, or this is how things go. This is your school district, you go to school. And I remember going to kindergarten orientation with my daughter the year before, because I was like, let's learn about this. And there were certain things that I was kind of like scratching my head at. There's a big class size. They had class sizes of 25 to 27 kids. They only had one recess a day. Arts programs were like getting cut down, and I didn't love that, but I was like, you know what am I gonna do about it? Like, this is the school we're going in, and let's have this happen. And all of a sudden, having this pandemic and taking a moment to pause and actually think through, well, what do I want for my child's education? Like, I really feel like it empowered me to get into the driver's seat, so to speak, that I never would have been in before, and started just really thinking through, what is best for our family. And like I said, my oldest is a rising kindergartner. And so our school district was going back and forth. Do you want to opt in for virtual, or maybe we'll have a hybrid model? And I'm like, she doesn't know how to read yet. I was like, how is she going to get herself on the computer? And I don't know if I have the time to do it. And so, we started thinking about all the things you were talking about, Brendan. What is the quality of education that's going to be received? What are things like socialization going to look like? What are the mental health side effects? If she's getting sent to school and not going to recess and not going to lunch, is that worth it? We started looking into private school options, and those are definitely available right now for our family. Personally, the ones around us, the class sizes were a little bit too big for us to feel comfortable with. But I think the biggest takeaway for me was getting a chance to really critically think about what we wanted for our family. And then it was really fun. Once we made the decision, okay, we want to do this, the sense of community that has come with it has been incredible. So I reached out, we had a Facebook group for our elementary school. And I just said, hey, I've got this crazy idea. Like, what if we started a classroom in the basement? Would anyone be interested? And my husband and I had kind of talked about how big our basement was and what we would feel comfortable with one teacher. And we decided we wanted 6 kids, we'll cap it at 6. I ended up with 24 families outreach with serious inquiries, like, please put me on the list. How can I get in? They actually started like asking, could we do like 2 sessions, like one in the morning, one in the afternoon? And it just was so eye-opening to see the demand out there, right? Like the demand for choice and optionality in what you're having for your kids. And so, like I said, it's created ways for me to just think about what we really want. And I've had a ton of people ask, well, what is next year going to look like for you? And I don't have an answer to that yet, right? Because I don't know what's happening with the public schools. I come from a family of public school teachers. I love teachers, I love school. But I don't know, like, it's been incredible to see what gets accomplished in a classroom with 6 children and 1 teacher. And we've got 6 different kids, 6 different learning styles, 6 different personalities, and the way that she's able to adapt and mold, and the one-on-one attention it's a struggle for me to actually, frankly, think what re-entering into a public school system with large class sizes would look like. One of the other things we did was we intentionally hired a teacher with an art background. So she's an art teacher by trade. She'd actually never taught kindergarten, but using art as sort of the medium to learn through. Just everything is hands-on, everything is creative, everything is tactical, and the things that Hadley, my daughter, comes home talking about learning, it's blowing my mind, frankly. And she's picking things up at a much quicker rate than, and again, I'm new to this whole education thing, but like when I kind of read through what expectations are, what curriculum's milestone points, and I tend to think it's because of that much more one-on-one personalized interaction. So it has brought a lot to question on school choice and what the future looks like. But I'm glad there's options out there for everyone. And again, I think my biggest kind of talking point to this would be that there is no one size fits all solution for anyone. There are families in a million different spots, a million different learning styles. And And so, I think it's just important to remember that a blanket approach to education now or in the future is probably not the way that we want to go.
Thanks, Ali. I think a question, kind of a direct follow-up to what you're just saying, in what do you think is something that we've lost or gained specifically from this experience, as students, as teachers, or as a wider community? And then also, do you think that the education industry will see changes on the other side of the pandemic when maybe things go back to normal? What will that look like? And that's a question to you both, but maybe Ali, you can go first.
Sure. Okay. So in terms of what I think we've lost, and again, I'm going to put my mom hat on. I think kids have lost a sense of normalcy. And in a lot of ways, they've lost just sort of that childhood joy and the ability to be a carefree kid. They've had to grow up a lot quicker, and all of a sudden really understanding the cause and effect relationship between what a global pandemic means and how that affects their everyday life. And again, my experiences is with young kids, but they're having to grow up real fast. What have we gained? I think as a society, we've gained a lot, right, from technology. If you asked people a year ago what Zoom was, how many people would know what we're talking about? Today, we've got grandparents hopping on Zoom. Like, my family's actually talking. So my husband's family and my family both live out of state. We are talking with our out of state relatives so much more now because being on this virtual platform for communication is just so much a part of our everyday lives now. So I think that's a positive. For me, the isolation piece has been hard for kids, obviously, but again, kind of stepping into this education role new, this sense of community and the new people that I've met through launching a micro school has been really, I would view that as a positive gain and opportunity all around. I'm getting, and it's through various platforms. There's LinkedIn groups, there's Facebook groups, but for pandemic pods, for micro schools, anyone who's kind of going down an alternative path of education, having the opportunity to connect with them, see what they're doing, see what's working, see what's not working, have just this sense of community where other people are going through the same thing. We all have had to develop COVID protocols. Well, what do those look like? We've all had to talk about, what are travel policies? If we're bubbling together, how does that work? How do you deal with, students that are operating 2 grade levels ahead and someone behind? Like, all things that, as a mom, as a parent, as someone who's now homeschooling, I don't necessarily have those answers. But when I have a group of other people who are going through the same thing, that sense of community has been tremendously helpful. And I would, people, again, I never would have met or had the opportunity to interact with outside of this. So I would take that as a positive, a silver lining amongst, the layers and layers and layers of difficulty that we're all having to navigate through right now.
Thank you. Brendan, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I would say, and I come at it from not being a parent, not having kids going through it. So I hope you all will forgive me, but I see, one of our biggest lost opportunities is time, literal time. So much lost learning has occurred from March of last year and continues to occur through right now. So typically, a child would be getting off of school May, June, then they'd have 2.5 months off. They come back and that would be the summer slide. And you could expect the students to lose a little bit of learning and knowledge over that period of time. But we're combining that with this COVID slide and the time that they haven't spent learning. They've been disengaged, and they're often coming back to school this year with almost a full grade level behind where they could have been or should have been. So I feel like that was one of the biggest tragedies that we had coming through COVID, and that we're still dealing with now, is like accumulation of lost time and lost learning, lost knowledge that we have as a society deal with. Trying to get them back up to grade level and trying to get students who are going to, or 16, 17 are going to run out of time before they have to be prepared for college. But I think, one of the benefits is that we've broken through what our sense of what education has to look like. And in some ways that's given us a bit more of a freedom to explore different ways to deliver knowledge and to help students speed up. So I'm really hoping that we can start to look at personalized learning options, at benchmark assessments to identify where students are, leveraging different kinds of technology to deliver content to students based on their learning needs and allowing them to move through more quickly at accelerated paths, allow teachers to leverage data more effectively to actually deliver resources to those individual students who need it based on the data they're getting back in real time. So that we can try and make up for some of these gains that we've really lost due to the pandemic, and then hopefully embracing some different instructional methods and technologies that will create more engaging learning, that we can sort of stop that loss and then understand where they are so we can move forward from there.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. So we do have to wrap this up to get to our other very exciting speaker. But I think just as a final touch in maybe one sentence, if there's one thing that you would like to see happen in the education industry post-pandemic, what would it be?
I would like to see the concept of resiliency baked into the fabric of our school districts so that parents like Allie and others, when they go to, when something happens and they turn to the school doesn't throw their hands up like, what's going on? They know exactly what to do. The teachers are trained. They have the right content. They have the right materials. They have the pedagogical prowess to tackle any kind of situation that arises, whether it's a pandemic or whether it's a hurricane or a tornado or a big snowstorm that keeps students out for even just a day, that they know what they're going to do. They can flip on a switch.
I love that. I love that. And yeah, mine is that I really hope that families can feel more empowered to be in the driver's seat of their child's educational journey. And also I would say to elevate ways that families can find out what those options are. Because it's not, right now, you got to dig. So if we can really elevate ways that families can find ways to create that custom fit education for their children, I would love to see that.
Wow. Thank you both so much for joining us today. I really enjoyed listening to your conversation. You're two very different experiences in the education industry. Lawrence, I'm going to hand it over to you to move on to the next portion of our session today.
Thank you, Sanam, and thank you to the panelists for that wonderful discussion. I'm going to go ahead and get the PowerPoint presentation up while Racine introduces our next speaker, Joey Price.
Thanks, Lawrence. Is everyone hearing me? Mm-hmm. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for staying tuned for this session. It's a pleasure to introduce our next speaker today. Joining us is an award-winning human resource executive, business coach, thought leader, and professor. He's the founder and CEO of Jumpstart HR LLC, a HR consulting practice specifically for small businesses and startups. And he's the host of Business, Life, and Coffee, a weekly professional and personal development podcast, where he shares carefully curated conversations on professional finance, psychology, professional development, and business. Here to discuss some practical ways in keeping engagement in the virtual context, please join me in welcoming Joey Price.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, Larry and Racine, and to the department. It truly is an honor to be here today. And I think the most important thing that I want to say is that kudos to everyone on the call who is choosing to invest in their career and invest in their education by wanting to learn about the future of work, the future of education, and just to understand what role you might play and what part you may play in that. And so in the limited time that we have together, I'm going to share my screen and walk through a conversation about how to keep engagement in the virtual education and in the workplace, because the reality is it's changing, right? We are in the midst of COVID, and there are so many things that are happening that change not only what we do, but how we do it. There's been a significant pivot to the online space. And then there's been a pivot to, here we go. Talk about pivoting. All right, there we go. Now you can see me. So there's been a pivot to the tactics that we use and the way that we reach people and the way that we connect with people. But there are, as we continue to navigate this this change, there are some truths that we need to hold on to, and I think that we can cling to make us better at performing and communicating and sharing things, whether it be online, whether it be with friends, whether it be in a one-on-one meeting, or if it's even just in a education setting. So my promise to you in these next few moments that we have together is that I'm going to give you some principles that will help you share content worth remembering. All right, now the first thing though I want to discuss is just for us to talk about, what is the foundation of effective communication? Before COVID, we would have thought that the foundation of communication might be for us to be in one room, to all be in the same space, to be able to reach out and touch the person that you're talking to. But we're on Zoom, we're on LMSs, we're on Hangouts, we're on FaceTime, we're on Snapchats, we're on all these other mediums to stay in touch with people that we want to connect with. And, there's no more in person, at least not in the way that we used to be used to. So that can't be the foundation of effective communication, right? Being in the same space, being able to read body language, all of that those are nice things, but that's not the foundation of effective communication. And when we think about what is the foundation of communication, so if it's not being in the same room, if it's not being able to interpret body language and things like that, then really what is that piece that let someone know that what they have communicated really landed with the audience that they were talking to, whether that's a one-on-one conversation or a one-to-many conversation. And to sum it all up, and this is the main point of the presentation today, and trust me, we're going to unpack this so that you have the tools and tips to be successful in this area. I have this Maya Angelou quote, and it says, "People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." And if you stop for a second and think about that, think about some of the shows that you watch. Think about some of the podcasts that you listen to. Think about some of the professors that you enjoyed the most. Do you remember verbatim what they said? Do you remember verbatim how they walked across the classroom? Or if it's a favorite Netflix episode, do you remember exactly what happened 10 minutes into the show? No, you probably don't. And if you do, you're a very rare person who has a photographic memory, and you're very special, and I wish I had your skill. But the reality is that people don't forget how you made them feel. And that is the foundation, or at least what I believe is the foundation to not only effective communication, but engagement in the virtual education and in this new way of work. Now, speaking to reality here, of course, there are still in-person businesses. Of course, there are still restaurants that you can go to. And of course, there are still family members that you're going to talk to and do that face-to-face. So what I want you to remember is that this foundation of effective communication that I'm going to teach you is something that is working in person and virtual. I'm just super excited talking about it because it's a muscle that if you practice it and you get good at it or get better at it, it's not going to matter what slides you have. It's not going to matter what information you have to deliver. But if you start to frame your conversations and the messaging that you have in this way, you're going to be more successful. So no matter what I say today, just remember that people will never forget how you made them feel. So years after this presentation, you're not going to remember what I said, although I hope you do. But you're going to remember, hey, remember that Joey guy who was on our webinar back in October for GW? Oh yeah, I liked him. Yeah, he had some good stuff to say. I'm already incepting that into your brain. It's an inception that you'll walk away from this feeling great. Anyway, all right, so let's unpack the foundations of effective communication. But first, I want to ask you to think about, and you can drop this in the chat. It's not so easy for me to hop in and look at the chat, or maybe let's go ahead and pull it up. All right, cool. So I can see what you are saying in the chat. So I want to see you talking in the chat. So let's see, how do you know if you've communicated effectively? This is a question for you to respond to. And you are all students here, bright students at a phenomenal institution. So I know you've got some answers that you can share. And I'm just going to have some filler talk for maybe 20 seconds because I want to see those answers pour in about some of the ways that you can communicate effectively. This model of communicating in this picture it's not happening as often as it used to, right? Because if you're this close to someone nowadays, it's likely that you're wearing masks, and it's likely that all of these folks that are in the room here, this meeting isn't happening face to face; it's happening over a Zoom or a web conference. And I don't know about you, but do you watch old shows now? I'm walking through Frasier on Hulu. Don't ask me why, but I just have this thing about like going to old shows and watching all of their seasons. But do you look at shows now and you're like, oh man, why are you so close? Don't you know what COVID is? And like our brains are just wired that to get the heebie-jeebies when we think about people in close spaces. So COVID's already like changed our perspective a bit. Sylvia says that she knows she communicated effectively when she sees action. That is great. Someone else says, sorry if I mispronounce your name. I'm so sorry. But you say when people are actively listening and not passively listening. That is great. When you have people on the edge of their seat saying, oh man, what is it that you're saying? I'm locked into every word. Amma says, by the feedback you receive. Yes, you want to know that there's action that's taking place, and you want to know that that feedback that you received, whether it's hey, job well done, or hey, I'm going to do the thing that you told me to do, or hey, I'm going to take this this tool and this thing that you told me to do and practice it in my day-to-day life. Those are all great examples of what you should be doing to know that there is effective communication. Now, what I want to talk about in the bulk of the time that we have together, and it's not a lot, so I'm going to move my face around so it's not in the way. All right, cool. So how do you engage adult learners? Well, when you're crafting a message, when you are thinking about delivering communication to someone, and I believe that communication is the heart of engagement, tying in the message that you have to say with the action that you want people to take. And usually when you're communicating for one of two reasons. Either you're there to inform people, or to entertain people. And a lot of times, the most effective communicators find a way of doing both. It's not always that you are a bright and airy personality, because some of the most impactful people that I've listened to, they talk like this. And you listen to what they have to say because you know their words are valuable. So I want you to think about, it's not your personality, it's not how you say, but it's more the framing of what you say and the framing of the way that you deliver a message. There was a helpful 5-step tool. A gentleman by the name of Malcolm put together this list of how do you engage adult learners. And if you're talking to an audience, you want them to learn something in some way. And so the 5 ways that you engage adult learners is understanding what the rules of engagement are when talking to adults as opposed to talking with children. Some of these blur lines a bit, but a lot of these are unique to adults. Number 1, adults need to understand why something is important to know or do. So before you even get into the meat of a conversation, you need to establish urgency or importance. And you need to have a compelling reason of why it's urgent and important. Okay. Second thing, adults, because we're all big boys and girls, right? We all want to have the freedom to learn in our own way. You've got to think you're talking to someone who, before you engaged with them in this conversation, they've had a lifelong experience of what works for them and what doesn't work for them when it comes to how they like to hear information and how information is filtered through their perspective. And so you have to understand that people want freedom to learn in their own way. Next, adults like for learning to be experiential. Obviously, we as kids liked for learning to be experiential. And when we were experiencing things, whether it's play or music or PE, we didn't even know we were learning. We were just having a great time, right? We didn't know we were learning teamwork or learning how to take care of our bodies or learning creativity and expression. But for adults as well, learning is experiential. And so being intentional about how you create opportunities for folks to practice what you preach. That's a pun there. All right, but you also want to make sure that the time is right for them to learn. So are you giving an adult information that they need to know when they need to know it? And if you feel like they need to know it, you have to start with understanding why something is important, and you have to tell that to them. The next thing is the education process should be positive and encouraging, because we don't all gather around and pay good money to go see demotivational speakers, right? We don't buy self-hurt books, right? We want to make sure that if we are teaching or if we're training or if we're coaching or if we're guiding, we make sure that the environment is positive and encouraging. So there are a few practical suggestions that I have to make sure that you can implement those 5 skills in whatever method of communication you have, whether that's an email that you need a response from, whether it's a lesson that you have to teach for your class, whether it is a presentation that you have to give, whether it is a one-on-one conversation where you need someone to take action. I promise you, if you practice these skills like a muscle, you will get stronger. The first thing is, and wow, if you're afraid of heights, I'm sorry, but this picture just kind of nails what I really wanted to say. So when it comes to establishing importance, think about this. Before you ask someone to jump out of a plane, you have to have a compelling why. I would never jump out of a plane. I would never. Why would I jump out of a practically good plane? It's working. There's fuel. There are engines that work. There's a really great pilot. I'm comfortable. But there are people who, for a living, jump out of a plane. And the reason why they jump out of a plane for a living is because there's a compelling why for them. If they're in the armed services and they're jumping out of planes, it's likely because their component of a mission is so important that in order for their team to win or for their side to win, they have to play their part. So whether that's reconnaissance, whether that's boots on the ground, combat, whatever it may be, there's a compelling reason for them to jump out of the plane. Otherwise, there'd be rebellion. There'd be, hey, I'm not going to do this because I don't trust this parachute, or I don't trust where I'm landing. You have to think of what is the compelling reason for why you want people to take action on what it is that you want them to do. And maybe it's not as drastic or heart racing as like jumping out of a plane, but maybe it's, hey, I need you to call this person, or I need you to meet me at a certain time, or I need you to learn this skill because it's incredibly important and valuable for you. You have to have a compelling why. Otherwise, I've heard it said that a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. So you've got to get their will on your side. All right, so the next one, this is where we talk about having the ability to learn at your own pace. And so just like a kid riding a bike, right? You wouldn't just put a 6-year-old on a motorcycle and say, all right, have fun, go around the block, and I will see you later. That is a recipe for disaster. But in the perspective of communication, you have to respect the pace and perspective of your audience. So what I like to do before I communicate to a group or, prepare something to share with people, I think about who is going to be in the room, what are some current assumptions they have about this topic, and how do I address those assumptions? And a funny thing happens when you do that. You not only create a more compelling conversation, but you start to get people perking up about the topic in an area that's interesting for them. And the moment that you hook them, that's when you get them listening. I recently bought a Peloton bike, and so I'm going to be one of those snobs who post their bike on Instagram all the time and ask people for their handles. So just be forewarned that that's coming if you follow me on Instagram. But one of the things that I value and what I appreciate and what I think what makes Peloton so successful is that throughout the course of classes, they're calling people by name and acknowledging different milestones for them. And so for pace and perspective of an audience, what Peloton does that's really successful is they'll say, hey, Sylvia, I see this is your first time taking a class. Welcome. Or they may say, hey, Amma, this is your 50th class. We're celebrating the fact that you are joining with us today. Or they may say, hey, Larry, it's Larry's birthday, everybody. Let's give Larry a quick acknowledgement. Understanding the pace and perspective of your audience is incredibly important because it's not just that you want people to know what you have to say, right? But you want to make sure that they feel welcome, that they feel involved and engaged. Let's go to the next one really quickly. Remember that sometimes experience is the best teacher. So you may, I call it being the link in someone's chain. So if you're trying to communicate something to someone, you may have to realize that you are going to tell people what to say and what to do and how to act, but the lesson may not stick for them until they go out and they figure it out themselves or they do it themselves. We've got somebody here with some cowboy boots on and they look pretty fresh, pretty new, but there's gum on it, right? What is that person going to know next time they step out in those boots? They're going to watch where they're walking. So it's not always, I already realized my head was in the way. All right, experience is the best teacher. It's not always that your lesson or what you have to share is going to seal the deal for learning and taking action on what that person needs to do. Sometimes you have to realize that they won't learn it and it won't settle with them until they get out there and practice. So we're all going to watch where we're walking now that we see this person with the gum on their shoe. That looks like a big wad of gum too. I don't think anyone chews gum that big. But anyway, it's for illustrative purposes. All right, going into one of the last ones here is never rush the main idea. So this one is important because if you think about what I said at the beginning, right, you want to set the importance and why someone should pay attention to what it is that you have to say. But you don't say the main idea before you've established importance, because otherwise people won't tune you out. They're going to tune you out until they realize, hey, I need to pay attention to this person because they're telling me something that I need to know. And so I say never rush the main idea because you need to be sure that you've gotten the attention of your audience before you tell them what it is that they need to know. So never rush the main idea. Now, that doesn't mean you bury it until the end and like, oh, by the way, the main thing I want to share is da 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 da. No, make sure that you have a system and a rhythm of setting up importance first and then sharing what the main idea is. And then not rushing it also means like, don't rush past it. Always make sure that you're going back and touching on it. And that's what's going to reinforce what it is that you want people to learn. With this training, I said it's not that people are going to remember what you say or what you do, but how you made them feel. So all of these moments that I'm sharing here today are things that will help you ensure that you're helping create a positive learning environment and make sure that people are receptive to the message that you have to say. Which brings me to my last point is keep people in their happy place. You want to make sure that like every lesson isn't going to be ice cream with your friends, right? But even if you have to share difficult information, you want to make sure that you are doing it in an environment where people feel comfortable. I'm not one of those folks that think the best way to lead is to lead by fear, because as soon as there is no more reason to fear you, or until there's a outlet to go somewhere else, people are going to leave. So, but if you keep people in their happy place, they're going to enjoy being around you. They're going to enjoy hearing what you have to say, and you're going to have established trust. So whatever methodology or whatever vehicle you're using to communicate with people, you want to make sure that you're keeping them in their happy place. And remember, it's all about feeling, because you probably forgot what I said 30 seconds ago, but you don't forget how you feel in this moment. So keep people in their happy place. And just remember that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. Shout out to Maya Angelou. And another key of effective communication is make sure that you tie it all up with a bow and re-emphasize the main point, because that helps you get perspective. So I believe those are all the slides I have. Um, yeah, one more question. How do you know if you communicated effectively? You could drop it in the chat. What are some of the lessons that you've learned? Obviously, there's lessons about ice cream and gum and jumping out of planes and what was that all about. But the main thing is make sure that you create a positive environment for people to learn, and you make sure that you repeat the main point so that you don't rush the main idea, and make sure you keep visiting the main idea. So this has been fun. This has been great. I appreciate the time that we've had. I'll stick around if there's any questions, but here's my contact information in case you want to keep in touch. Um, yeah, I have to make sure that I don't always wear this outfit, because it's kind of weird to have a photo and then you wearing the same thing. So whenever I speak, I never wear this outfit, in case you were wondering. You probably weren't, but anyway, I'll stick around for some questions. I don't know how much more time we have, but I've really enjoyed speaking with you today. I hope you take something from this lesson. And I know that the education landscape can be challenging and frustrating, but in light of COVID, I should say. But hang in there. There's a world that is waiting for your expertise and for your contribution. So trust the process, and thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Joey, for being here. I want to thank the other panelists for joining us as well. Thank you for joining our session, and hopefully you will join the next sessions at 3:45. Take care, everyone, and have a great day.